Hi, this video is designed to address some of the issues you may have with grammar in the upcoming 2020-2021 literacy test. So we're going to review parts of speech and punctuation marks. So a little bit of review and a few tips to guide us along here. So the overview is going to focus on the commonly referenced parts of speech and punctuation marks that are assessed in the OSSLT. So some questions on the test will use these terms, and it's expected that you both understand these terms and know how to apply them. Here's a sample question. What two things do the verbs in paragraph 1 suggest about Olivia? So this is coming out of one of the readings on the test and the sample test that is available to us. So ultimately, this question really relies on our knowledge about what a verb is. So the nice thing about the question is it does refer us back to the paragraph where we can find the answer, but we need to know what a verb is. So if we don't know what a verb is, we're going to have to be hard-pressed to be able to answer this question. Here's a question that's asked, what is the function of the dashes in paragraph 6? Now, you may be able to go into paragraph 6 and figure out what are the dashes, but if you're not really sure what they are or how they work, you may have a hard time answering this question. Similarly, here's another question about dashes. What does the dash in paragraph 5 introduce? Your answer. And again, your references to where to look, maybe you have an idea what it looks like. In terms of knowing what a dash is and how it works is important to answering these questions. So we're going to review the parts of speech that may be often referenced within the literacy test. We're not going to go through everything, but the ones that are more likely to come at you. So the first one is the verb, as we saw in that previous question. So a verb is an action word. So you probably remember that one. A verb is an action word. So we use the word verb to identify words that describe actions. Words such as jump, write, drive, look, think, consider. Common verbs we often use, but may not seem much like actions, include have, is, are, am, will, could, those sort of everyday kind of smaller verbs, right? And so think of verbs as the actions in a sentence. Every sentence will have a verb. It'll have some sort of action built into it. The other key component of a sentence, of course, are nouns. So we use the word noun to identify words that are people, places, or things, and even ideas. So we have proper nouns, and they identify specific people, places, or things. Words such as Aurelia, CN Tower, Beyonce, Google. Common nouns are not specific. Words such as city, structure, singer, software. You see what I did there, of course. Aurelia proper, city common, CN Tower proper, structure common. There are other common words, common nouns such as pen, computer, bus, street, timetable, friendship, community, family. There's a whole variety there. But again, they end up being people, places, or things. And these are our nouns. So verbs and nouns. Our next two parts of speech I want to look at is adjective and pronoun. So an adjective is a description word. So it adds information to a noun. So we use the word adjective to identify words that describe nouns. They're words that describe people, places, or things. So they're words that describe which one, what kind, how many, or whose. So for an example, let's describe dogs. The black dogs, the furry dogs, those 5 dogs, your dogs. You'll see I've used italics to emphasize the word that is the adjective. Black dogs, furry dogs, those 5 dogs, your dogs. We'll take a look here at pronouns. We use the word pronoun to identify words that replace or stand in for nouns, people, places, or things. So instead of repeating the same word in a sentence over and over again, we often rely on pronouns. Words to replace people such as I, you, he, she, they, them, herself, yourself, ourselves. These are all examples of words we use to replace people rather than simply restating someone's name over and over and over again. We can use words to replace things such as it, that, these, this, those, right? Once you ask for the pen, you don't want to keep on saying pen, you could say pass it to me. It replaces the word pen. So that's the world of pronouns. Pronouns are used to replace or stand in for nouns, and adjectives are the words we use to describe nouns. So that's it for the 4 parts of speech. There are others, but we'll move on to punctuation. Now, some of these, of course, you'll seem self-evident, and depending on your skills right? You may feel fairly confident in some of these, and that's great. So for example, a period, and of course, here's an example of period, you know where it belongs, and that should be a fairly easy question, a fairly easy mark on the literacy test if it comes up. A period indicates a stop to a sentence. It indicates the end of a sentence. I have used a period to each of my sentences, 1, 2, 3, and 2 more, by the way. Periods can also be used for abbreviations. So for example, I spoke with Sergeant Jones about the robbery. Mr., Mrs. also use periods for abbreviation, right? But for the most part, we will recognize that your period is going to go at the end of the sentence. Remember to, as a reader and as you're going through things, read for punctuation. And so make sure that if you hit a period, you take that moment to come to a complete stop and take that moment to pause and reflect, right? So a period, end of the sentence. Now a comma, we often call that about indicating a pause in a sentence. Sometimes you need to pause between a list of ideas, things, or people. Sometimes a comma is used to separate parts of a sentence or to separate some description from the main idea of this sentence. And you'll see I tried to do that right here. I've used this comma to separate this part of my sentence from this part of my sentence. Here's another example. My teacher, Miss Wilson, always makes me double check my work. And here I've used commas to separate this little sort of adjective piece here, or this description of Miss Wilson, the teacher's name. And so this is a useful one. My teacher, comma, Miss Wilson, comma, always makes me double check my work. The best way to know if a comma belongs or is missing is to read your sentence out loud. And I know that seems like a weird thing to do, perhaps when you're in a classroom setting and there's a variety of test takers, but ultimately, if you can read your work out loud, or if you're reading through the questions, if you can hear it, you'll understand those questions a bit better. You'll have a better sense of whether a sentence is working or not. So period and comma. Something a bit more complex, the colon and the dash. So colon is most commonly used to indicate a list. For example, there are many ways I like to unwind: reading, walking my dog, and playing video games with my friends. Hey, my sentence ends with a period. I've separated items in my list with commas, but I've introduced this list by a colon. So I've listed 3 things here, and I've used the colon to indicate to my reader, hey, we're going to set up a list of words. Colons, as well as periods, are also used in writing time. Your bus arrives at 7:45 a.m. and leaves at 2:25 p.m. So there's your use of colons. A dash, this little line here, is longer than a hyphen. You're kind of maybe used to a hyphen as connecting 2 words. This is a little bit longer. Looks like it'll be like double the size of a hyphen generally. So a dash is a mark of separation that's stronger than a comma. It is used to offset or highlight a word or a phrase. For example, after discovering their errors, all 5 of them, they quickly revised their work. It can also be used like a colon. For example, I did all my chores: sweeping, dusting, and vacuuming. So we'll take a look at 2 examples one more time. After discovering their errors, all 5 of them, they quickly revised their work. You'll notice too that what's on either side of the dash, if you deleted this and just read the sentence, after discovering their errors, they quickly revised their work, that would make a perfectly fine sentence, right? And in this case, the dash is used simply to introduce a list similar to a colon, a little less formal. A couple more to go through. The apostrophe. Apostrophes are most often used to show possession. For example, that is Mark's cat, and that is Oscar's dog. That is the teacher's workroom. Apostrophes can also be used to stand in place of missing letters. For examples, it's is the same as it is. Shouldn't is the same as should not. This, the apostrophe, there's the O. The apostrophe here, that's the I. For the most part, though, remember the apostrophe is about possession, about who it belongs to. It's not about plural. It's not about adding and saying there's more of things. It is really about saying who it belongs to. In this case, you have multiple teachers, and so you have the S, the apostrophe comes after the S because there's many teachers to begin with. It's a little bit tricky, but again, it's a useful one to know, and it's particularly used in the world of possession. Quotation marks are used to show exact speech. They indicate the start and the end of what is being said. For example, my mother said, Are you going to ask your teacher for extra help? I can't talk now, I replied. I'm late for class. So notice that the other punctuation goes inside the quotation marks. So we have the quotation mark here and here, the beginning and the end, the beginning and the end, the beginning and the end, right? And the punctuation, the question mark went inside. You'll see in this sentence, obviously, the person replies, I can't talk now, I'm late for class. We've got the I replied in there in the middle, right? Describes the person that's talking in this case. So there's that nature of quotation marks. So last couple, the ellipsis. Informally, you might have heard it called the ... The ellipsis is used to show omission. An ellipsis indicates that words have been omitted. They've been left out. They've been taken out. So for example, maybe in the original sentence, it reads like this. After school, I went to her house, which was a few blocks away, and then I went home. If we wanted to shorten that sentence, and again, if we were trying to quote it directly, and we wanted to shorten that sentence, we could do this. After school, I went to her house, and then I went home. So these three little dots, that ... that ellipsis, simply tells your reader that in the original sentence, there was something there, and you removed it. So that's that nature of ellipsis. Parentheses, you may have heard these called brackets. What they do is the same. Parentheses are used to offset information. They're used to add a word, phrase, or information to a part of the sentence. So for example, my sister, who is 9 years old, never puts the lid back on the toothpaste. So notice that what is in the parentheses could easily be removed and it would still make a good sentence. My sister never puts the lid back on the toothpaste. Same as we noticed in the dashes. And in fact, many ways, parentheses and dashes can work similarly, sometimes a bit more about style than anything. So again, within the parentheses, you have a starter and an end. And again, generally it's adding clarifying information to what simply preceded it. So this is information that describes the sister, right? So that's often what we find in parentheses. And often we put it in parentheses because it's useful information. Is it that important? Maybe not. And so we often use parentheses for that. Sometimes we'll use dashes to really say that it is important. And we really want this piece of information that describes this thing to really stand out. So that kind of does a quick overview for the punctuation marks and parts of speech. Hopefully you'll find this useful as you venture forward into writing the OSSLT. I wish you all the best and good luck.